When people first hear the phrase the power of networking, most of them imagine cocktail parties, forced smiles, business cards exchanged with no memory attached, or LinkedIn messages that start with, "Hope you're doing well," and end with a sales pitch. That shallow image is precisely why so many people misunderstand what the great business success books have been trying to teach for decades. Networking in its truest and most powerful form has never been about collecting contacts. It has always been about positioning yourself inside invisible flows of trust, opportunity information, and momentum that quietly determine who rises and who stays stuck, regardless of talent or effort. If you read the stories behind enduring business success, a strange pattern emerges. The people who reach extraordinary levels of influence rarely do so alone, and they almost never rely solely on technical skill. They move through life surrounded by people who open doors before they are even asked, who share insights before those insights become obvious, and who pull them into rooms they could never have entered on their own. What looks like luck from the outside is, on closer inspection, the compounded return of relationships built long before they were needed. This is the first uncomfortable truth most books hint at, but rarely say directly effort creates value, but networks decide where that value gets rewarded. Think about the entrepreneur who launches a company with an idea that is on paper no better than dozens of others. One gets funded, mentored, and promoted. The rest quietly disappear. Business books tell us this is about vision or execution, but if you read carefully between the lines, you'll notice the decisive moments often come from a phone call, returned quickly, an introduction made casually over coffee, or a recommendation given in a room the founder was not present in. Networking at its core is the architecture that allows your work to travel further than your physical presence ever could. Many success authors describe their early careers not as a straight climb, but as a series of intersections. At each intersection stood a person who changed the direction of their life, a mentor who reframed how they thought about risk, a peer who introduced them to a new industry, or even a competitor who became an unexpected ally. What matters is not how many people they knew, but how deeply they were trusted by a few. This is why shallow networking fails. Relationships built for extraction collapse under pressure, while relationships built on contribution gain strength over time. One of the most counterintuitive insights from business success literature is that networking is not an activity you turn on when you need something. It is a way of operating in the world. The most effective networkers are not the loudest in the room. They are the most attentive. They listen for patterns, remember small details, and connect people without immediate benefit to themselves. Over years, this behavior creates a reputation that precedes them. Opportunities begin to find them, not because they ask loudly, but because others trust that involving them will make the outcome better. There is also a psychological shift that books like to circle around the transition from a transactional mindset to a relational one. Early in a career, people often ask, "What can this person do for me?" Later, after enough failures and missed chances, the better question becomes, "How can I add value to this person's journey?" This shift is subtle but profound. It changes how conversations feel, how follow-ups happen, and how long relationships last. In the long run, value given without immediate expectation creates a kind of social equity that compounds silently, much like interest in a well-managed investment. Another recurring theme is proximity. Business success books repeatedly show that being physically or intellectually close to the right people changes what you believe is possible. When you regularly interact with individuals who think bigger, move faster, or tolerate more risk than you do, your internal limits begin to loosen. Networking in this sense is not just about access to opportunities, but access to expanded standards. You start to normalize behaviors and ambitions that once felt unrealistic and that normalization quietly reshapes your decisions. Yet here is where many readers miss the deeper lesson. Networks are not neutral. They amplify who you already are. If you are curious, disciplined, and generous, a strong network multiplies those traits. If you are careless, entitled, or unfocused, a network will magnify those flaws just as quickly. This is why some people seem to burn bridges everywhere they go, while others build roads that last decades. The books warn us implicitly that networking is not a shortcut around character. It is a mirror that reflects it at scale. As careers advance, the nature of networking evolves. Early connections help you learn and survive. Later connections help you influence and shape systems. Many successful business leaders eventually realize that their most valuable role is not being the smartest person in the room, but being the connector who aligns talent, capital, and vision. At that stage, networking stops being about personal gain and starts becoming a form of leadership, because the ability to bring the right people together determines outcomes more than any single idea ever could, and choice that comes when success is no longer hypothetical, but real and demanding, and asking you to decide whether you built connections merely to climb faster or to build something that lasts beyond your own ambition. And this is exactly where the conversation must turn, because understanding networking at this level requires us to look honestly at the hidden costs, the silent rules, and the long-term consequences that no one tells you about until it is too late to ignore them, and until you realize that the way you built relationships in the beginning has already determined how much freedom you will have later, when the doors you hoped would open easily suddenly require trust accumulated over decades, not enthusiasm manufactured in a moment. This is the part most business books imply, but rarely confront directly. Networking has a time dimension, and time is unforgiving. You cannot rush credibility. You cannot fake shared history. And you cannot suddenly become valuable to a network you neglected when you were unknown, impatient, or overly focused on short-term gain. The freedom people admire later in life, the ability to choose projects, partners, and pace is almost always prepaid in the currency of earlier generosity, consistency, and restraint. At this stage, the hidden rules of networking come into focus. One rule is asymmetry. In the beginning, you will always need others more than they need you. The mistake many make is resenting this imbalance instead of embracing it. The most successful individuals understand that early imbalance is not exploitation, it is tuition. They show up prepared, curious, and useful long before they are influential. Over time, the balance shifts quietly, and one day, they realize people are calling them first, not because of their title, but because of their track record as someone who shows up when it matters. Another silent rule is memory. Networks remember how you behaved when nothing was guaranteed. They remember whether you disappeared after getting what you wanted, whether you took credit alone, whether you stayed calm under pressure, and whether you treated people well when they had nothing obvious to offer. These memories compound into a reputation that precedes you into rooms you have never entered. Business success books often attribute this to brand, but at the human level, it is simply remembered behavior repeated over time. There is also a cost to networking that rarely gets discussed, the discipline to say no. Strong networks are not built by saying yes to everyone. They are built by aligning with people whose values, pace, and integrity match your own. Every yes to the wrong relationship taxes your time, attention, and credibility. The people who seem to move effortlessly later in life are often those who were very selective early on, even when options were scarce. They understood that networks shape direction, and direction determines destiny. As your career matures, networking becomes less about expansion and more about depth. The number of meaningful relationships often shrinks, but their quality intensifies. Conversations become more honest, stakes become higher, and trust becomes non-negotiable. At this level, a single introduction can change the trajectory of a company, a career, or even an industry. This is why seasoned leaders protect their networks fiercely. They know that trust once broken is not just lost, it contaminates everything connected to it. The deepest insight from business success literature is this: networking is not something you do alongside your work. It is how your work survives and scales in the real world. Ideas are fragile. Talent is common. Execution is exhausting. But relationships, when built with patience and principle, outlast all three. They carry your name into conversations you will never hear, defend your reputation when you are absent, and create optionality when markets' roles or ambitions shift unexpectedly. And so the true power of networking is not influence, visibility, or access. It is resilience. It is the ability to adapt without starting over, to fail without disappearing, and to grow without losing yourself. When you understand this, you stop chasing connections and start cultivating continuity. You become less interested in who can help you today, and more focused on who you want to become reliable to over the next 10 or 20 years. That is the moment networking stops feeling like a strategy and starts feeling like stewardship, because you are no longer building a ladder to climb faster, but a foundation strong enough to support whatever you choose to build next. If this perspective shifted the way you see relationships even slightly, take a moment to sit with it. Think about one relationship you could nurture without needing anything in return. Leave a comment with what resonated most, or share how this reframed your understanding of success. And if you want to continue exploring the hidden principles behind wealth, freedom, and long-term influence, subscribe and stay with me on this journey of decoding the ideas that quietly shape extraordinary lives.